Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Steve with SJ Lincoln Realty, and today we have a really fun topic, the cheapest and easiest way to become a real estate investor. If you are someone that's been considering buying your first rental property, or you're currently a renter, you're a tenant, and you don't think financially you're ready to become a homeowner quite yet, whatever camp you fall into, this video is going to be geared directly towards you. I want to give you that push, whether it's to buy your first rental property or to become a homeowner yourself. Again, you really want to focus on this particular video. Again, my name is Steve with SJ Lincoln Realty. Let's get into it. So here's the itinerary for our video today. If you know anything about real estate, you know location plays a massive role. So we are going to be talking about where the property is located. Just a little bit of a spoiler, this is going to be a 2-unit in the city of Troy, New York that we're going to be discussing today. So why is this particular area attractive? And we're actually going to walk the property together ourselves. So there's going to be some footage, give you a feel for what the property is today versus what it could be down the road. And we are talking about purchasing a property. So we are going to familiarize ourselves with what the real estate market looks like today, not only from a purchase aspect, but also there is a rental component to this property as well. So we want to know what the rental market looks like. What's a reasonable price we could charge for the rental unit? We are going to go over some of the inspection results, some things that came up during the due diligence period. And ultimately, as I mentioned in the open, this video is geared towards people who aren't real estate investors yet, but are thinking about it, but also current tenants who want to become owners. We're going to go point by point through some financials. That way you can get comfortable when it comes time for you to make the step. You have a good frame of reference of, okay, this is reasonably what I should expect if I were to take this next step. But before we get there, just a quick background on who I am and my day-to-day responsibilities in the real estate world. So that's me. I'm a product of the University at Albany's MBA program. Earlier in my career, I had stints at a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. I've spent time in banking, both branch management as well as back office, doing commercial debt restructures and REO sales, and also spent some time locally with a small investment firm here in the city of Albany. However, these days, most importantly, I'm the broker here at SJ Lincoln Realty, helping clients with the standard buying and selling of real estate, and also have been a real estate investor, property owner for over 10 years. Which brings us to the reason we're here today, which is to cover why you should be a real estate investor or why you should transition away from being a tenant into a property owner. And we're going to talk about the location. The property we're going to be discussing today is located in the city of Troy. And for those maybe not from the area, not familiar, Troy is going to be about 10 miles north of the state capital of Albany and 30 miles south of Saratoga Springs. Troy does have a number of things working in its favor, one of which being its population. So census points to about 50,000 people living in the city, and that's going to make it one of the larger cities here in the capital region. And with a large population, you hope to see large employment opportunities, which Troy does have a nice mix of. So you're going to have your hospitals, you're going to have your higher education. There's a number of colleges in Troy, but you're also going to have a nice mix within the private sector as well. So you have folks like Regeneron who employ thousands of people in the area. So why I bring this up is because let's say you find yourself in a situation where you own real estate in an area that has a heavy concentration in one particular field. If for any reason that field suffers any type of a downturn, you more or less have all of your eggs in one basket, if that makes sense. So if there are widespread layoffs, you're going to see that significantly harm property values. So when you have a situation like this where there's a little bit of different fields involved in the employment mix, usually that's more of a healthy situation to find yourself in. And with employment, we would then want to piggyback off of that and talk about income. So the income for the area, the household median income, going to be in the high 40s, which is going to put it on par with your Schenectady's, with your Albany's. So Troy very much fits within the character income-wise for the rest of the area. We'll now walk the property together. This is a duplex, meaning it's one house with 2 apartments located inside of it. The layouts of the apartments are going to be mirror images of each other. Now, there's no doubt the property does need work, but there are some attractive aspects here. First of all, the side-by-side construction is going to be more desirable than your traditional top-down. Tenants have access to, the porch, the backyard, so that's going to be a plus. Also, there is off-street parking. Now, when you're buying properties within the city, that can be sometimes hit or miss depending on when you're buying. So off-street parking is going to be attractive. There's no hiding the fact that the property hasn't been updated in quite a long time. But if you look beyond that, the layouts, the attractive aspects of it, there is opportunity to be found here. So you've had a chance to walk the property. Now the question is, what the heck is it worth? You're working with an agent. You want them to be sending you no less than, let's call it, 4 recent sales in your neighborhood. And when I say recent, I'm talking within the past 6 months. Values have fluctuated so much over the past year, year and a half, that really anything older than 6 months doesn't represent the real estate market of today. Now, the outlier to that is going to be if your property is unique in whatever reason. So maybe you're buying a duplex, but every other single house that's sold nearby you has been a single family. Or the property you're buying has 20 acres. Meanwhile, all of your neighbors that have sold have 4 acres, right? There's something distinct about your particular property. In that case, maybe you do want to bump out your search criteria, call it 12 months. But again, the farther back in time you go, the less of a representation it's going to be of today's market. So what we're looking at here today is the MLS. I went through, pulled a couple buildings that I thought were a good representation of the property that you and I just walked through together. And we'll take a look at some photos here. So these are all going to be, pretty basic buildings. I think maybe a touch nicer than where we just came from, but I think they're going to be probably within the same ballpark. One thing you want to key in on is square footage. That's going to be super important. Sometimes the MLS listings or your Zillow listings or whatever platform you're looking on won't include the square footage. No big deal. If you think it's going to be very comparable to the building you're looking to purchase, you can contact the local municipality and they're going to have all this information on their rolls. So don't be lazy. Go the extra couple minutes, find the information you're looking for. So we're looking at 150, 170,000 for buildings I believe are going to be pretty close. Now, you might be thinking, well, Steve, I don't have access to the MLS. How the heck am I supposed to do this? So it's not as good, but everyone has access to Zillow. So what we're going to do is, we'll just do this kind of live together. We're looking for properties that have sold, okay? So when you pull up the platform here, so instead of sale or for rent, you're just going to hit sold, right? And you're going to key in on a dollar amount you think is a fair range for what you're looking to buy. So we don't think this is going to be $1 million property. We don't think it's going to be a $25,000 property. So I said, show me everything within 100 and 175,000. And I want to see everything with above 2 bedrooms because this is each unit has 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. So I don't want to see anything that doesn't equal what I'm trying to buy. And most importantly, I'm trying to buy a multifamily house here. I don't want to be shown lots of land or apartments, right? So we'll make sure that's relevant and hit apply. And it's going to spit out a whole bunch of results for you. And we want to focus on the particular area. So it's a lot of data points, right? There's way more here than is going to be comparable for our property, but it is a place to start, right? So we can kind of filter through and see, 145, 150, 165. We kind of get an idea of what the property is going to be worth. Now, when you're working on Zillow, sometime they are going to have the listing photos. In this case, they don't. So it's going to be kind of hit or miss. So long story short, there's no substitute for the MLS. So if you're working with an agent, ask them to be sending you the actual listings themselves. However, if you're not to that point, maybe you haven't found an agent you're in love with yet, or you're thinking, I'm just not quite ready to start working with an agent, start with Zillow because it's going to get you a good amount of information to kind of get the conversation started. So now that we have a good idea of what we want to pay for the building, the next question is, how much rental income can we get? So as mentioned in the intro, this is a duplex. There are 2 units. We're going to be living in one. We're looking to rent out the other. How much can we rent out the other one for? I'm going to send you back to the MLS. So again, if you're not working with an agent, that is going to set you back a little bit. However, this question is also going to be very much price point specific. If you are dealing in higher price point neighborhoods, your expensive towns, those listings, the majority of them are going to be on the MLS. However, if you're in the middle income neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, typically owners don't list those listings, don't list those vacancies, I should say, with an agent. Typically, they try to fill them themselves. So for this particular case, these are going to be lower price point apartments that we're looking to fill. So you're going to have plenty of information on your Facebook marketplaces, on your Zillows, on your apartments.com. So I went through and pulled a few that I thought would be a pretty good representation. These are live listings, so technically, anyone could go out and rent these today. This is a 2-bed, 1-bath, not too far from where we're looking to buy. Kind of on the smaller side, but this is maybe looks a little bit cleaner, but again, it's not going to be quite the same square footage. This is also, what the heck is this? What am I looking at? Oh, I pulled this one up because sometimes if you don't find a ton of available listings, which I did not for this project. However, what I did was I went to the MLS and said, show me all of the multifamilies in Troy that are currently for sale. And then within that, I can pull what they're currently renting for. So in this case, we do see, and hopefully this is coming across to you folks that are watching, but they have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, which is the layout of our building, for $900. And they do say this is an actual rent amount. So this isn't a vacancy that they're hoping to fill. This isn't a, hey, if you buy the building, you could potentially rent it for this. This is an actual rental. So they're getting $900. And when we take a look at the photos, this isn't anything, this isn't anything special. This is pretty medium. And then one last one here. This is 2-bed, 1-bath. They're asking $1,100 for this, but again, this isn't. It's a clean, safe, pretty basic apartment. So, they're getting $900 for this. They're asking I think probably $850, $900 in its current state of the apartment would be reasonable. Now, ideally, would you be cleaning up the apartment a little bit before you rented it out? Yep, but we're not going to factor that in. We're factoring it in as of today in its current state. What would we be able to generate for income? And I think $900 would be, given its size, given its off-street parking, given its side-by-side structure, $900 would be more than reasonable. For the next portion of the video, I want to bring the conversation back to why it's just so critically important that you're hiring quality people on your team when it comes time to purchase a property. As an agent, when you walk a property with me, I'm happy to point out, hey, it looks like there might be a crack in the foundation there, worth some additional due diligence, or hey, we're up on the second floor and I noticed there might be some staining in the ceiling there. Could potentially be a roofing issue. I am not an inspector though, and we are not trained to be inspectors. Hiring a quality inspector is massively important. Now, for this particular case, there was a general inspection completed. During that time, he did flag that, hey, there's something with the roof he's not in love with, and his recommendation was get a professional roofer up there and give a second opinion, which is exactly what happened. And sure enough, the roofer went up and said there were some structural integrity issues to components of the roof. We were then able to take this report, take this information back to the seller and renegotiate some components to the acquisition, which is going to take us on a little bit of a side tangent. But when is it appropriate to try to negotiate after you've already come to terms versus when it would be inappropriate? You walk a property and out back you notice the deck is in complete disrepair. It's completely collapsed, or you're out front and you see there's a giant limbs of a tree growing over a house. You come to terms with the seller of the property, you agree on a price, you go do your inspections. You then go back to the seller and say, oh, by the way, that tree is making me a little bit nervous, or hey, I'd really like to have you contribute to rebuilding the deck after I close. That would be inappropriate. These are items you knew as a layman on the forefront, you knew this when you initially toured the property, to then say, oh, by the way, I want to renegotiate on that. This is information you had when you made the original offer. It would be inappropriate to try to renegotiate on that. However, you go do your inspections and it turns out the furnace doesn't work, completely inoperable. That would be appropriate because you've gone through, you've done your inspections. A functioning furnace probably, especially if you're going through during warmer months, as a layman, isn't something you would have flagged by yourself. So appropriate versus inappropriate. And that's going to take us on a tangent of a tangent, but you're going to hear terms thrown around like seller credit and price reduction. And sometimes they're used interchangeably when they shouldn't be. They are not the same thing. What's the difference between a seller credit and a price reduction? So a price reduction, we'll start there because that's going to be the easiest to understand because it's exactly what it sounds like. So you agree to purchase a property for $150,000, do your inspections, and you and the seller agree to a price reduction of $10,000. You're now purchasing that property for $140,000. A seller credit, on the other hand, is a little bit more nuanced. You're still paying $150,000. However, the seller is going to contribute $10,000 to your closing. So you're showing up the closing with $10,000 less than if there wasn't a credit. What's the difference? What's better? What's worse? Well, in the first example where your purchase price went from $150,000 to $140,000, your purchase price is lower, which means your mortgage is going to be lower, which ultimately means your monthly mortgage payment is going to be lower. So if you're focused on, I want the lowest monthly payment possible, the price reduction is going to be up your alley. If you're worried about, gosh, I'd really like to have as much money in my bank account as possible after we close, you're going to want to go the route of a seller credit because that is going to be the seller contributing to your costs, which means you show up to the closing with less. Talk to your lender because depending on what loan product they're putting you in, there is a cap on the amount of seller concessions depending on the type of loan that you're in. So you do want to identify that on the front end. But there's not necessarily one's not better than the other. It's just more of what direction is going to be best for you given your financial situation. We'll now pivot to talking about finances. And this is really going to be the meat and the potatoes of today's video. I am pushing renters into becoming owners. I want to give a push to wannabe real estate investors to actually become real estate investors themselves. And it's going to be the finances that are really going to be the most crystal clear way to make this happen. And we'll make this nice and big so hopefully everyone can see. We're going to be talking about $150,000 purchase price. We reviewed the sales market. We found that comparable duplexes to what we are looking to purchase trade right around $150,000. Now, we are talking about occupying the property, which means we qualify for owner-occupied financing. So you might be familiar with things like FHA financing, 3.5% down. You can certainly explore going that route. We're going to use 5% as an example today, which you can certainly get away with doing on conventional loans. So essentially what that means to you is you can borrow less to purchase real estate as long as you're actually occupying the building. And that's the big difference. So on top of a down payment, when you're purchasing property, you're actually going to have things on top of that called closing costs. That's going to include things like paying your attorney, paying your origination charges on your loan. If you're buying in New York State, there's going to be something called a New York State mortgage tax. You're going to have title insurance. There's a lot of costs that go into purchasing real estate on top of your closing costs. So it's going to be on the high side, but we're going to say we're estimating $7,500 in various types of closing costs. And earlier in the video, we discussed when it's appropriate to ask the seller to contribute to your closing costs versus when it's not. And for today's hypothetical, we're going to say that we came to terms on a $10,000 seller credit. Again, that's the seller contributing to our costs at closing, not a price reduction, but a seller credit. What does this mean to us? We have a lot of numbers here. How much is it going to cost you to acquire the property? Well, we have our costs of the down payment, and we have costs of closing costs. So that's what it's going to cost us to purchase the building. But then we're also getting some help. We're getting some help from the seller. They're going to be pitching in $10,000. So in this hypothetical, you have the ability to purchase real estate for $5,000. And you might say, great, this is very reasonable. I have $5,000. Or you might say, I don't, but I can kind of get the wheels turning on how I could potentially get there over the next year, start stashing away. $5,000 is a very reasonable goal, for pretty much anyone who is employed, whether it's just yourself or maybe you have multiple, a house of multiple incomes. $5,000 should be a pretty reasonable goal. Now, keep in mind, this does not account for a rainy day fund. So if you have, unexpected costs at the house, you're going to want to have some money stashed away for that. But when you're looking at the initial acquisition, you can make this happen, right? You don't need to have stacks and stacks of money to be able to transition again from a renter to an owner. What does this mean from a monthly cash flow perspective. So we know what it's going to cost us to be a renter. We are a renter right now. What's it going to cost us to make that move to ownership? We need to know what our mortgage payment is going to be. So luckily, the friends at Microsoft Excel have a nice little payment function. We're going to be borrowing money at, we'll say, 6%. And we're going to be doing so over a 30-year mortgage period. So that's going to be 360 mortgage payments. And the amount we're going to be borrowing, so the purchase price $150, but because we're actually putting a down payment down, we're actually only going to be borrowing $142,500. And hopefully, if we did this right, it's going to be a monthly principal and interest charge of $854. Now, on top of that, you are going to have your taxes. That's going to be your school taxes, your property taxes, and you're going to want to make sure that the property is insured. So if that's going to cost us, we'll call it $4,000 for the year. The monthly charge on that will be $333. So those are going to be the cost to maintain the building, and then ideally, how much do you want to set aside every month? I think $100 per unit per month would be a good goal for you. So that would be, we're talking a 2-unit property, so setting aside $200 for future expenses. Your furnace goes out, your roof, leaky sinks, things like that. It does cost money to own real estate. So those are going to be our out-of-pocket expenses on owning real estate. We are going to have rental income. So we are going to be renting the other side of the property. We talked about roughly how much we think we could get for that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you own rental properties, unfortunately, you are going to have vacancies. That's going to be people move out. Maybe it takes you a couple months to get it filled, or unfortunately, maybe you have someone that elects not to pay rent for a couple months. It's rare, but it does happen. So, we talked about $900 on the high side would be, given where the property is right now. Let's account for some vacancy. So instead of $900, let's just project we'll get maybe $750 per month. That's going to be pretty conservative, but I think it'll work for what we're trying to achieve here. So what we do know is that our expenses are going to be our mortgage payment, our taxes and insurance, and our maintenance, and that is going to be offset by our rental income. That's going to be coming in every month. So housing cost as an owner, if you were to purchase this property with the down payment we talked about and the assistance from the seller, your monthly cost is going to be, we'll call it $650 to own this duplex. Versus, we talked about the rental amount. So let's say instead of owning the property, you're a tenant, you're going to be living in it, paying rent. That's going to be $900. And there's no additional income, there's no additional maintenance as a renter. Your flat fee is pretty much it is what it is. So your housing cost as a tenant is actually $900. As you can see, we'll zoom in. Hopefully everyone's able to read these numbers okay. I meant to zoom in earlier. I apologize for that. So housing cost as a tenant is actually about a third higher than it is to actually own the property. You don't get the tax benefits. You don't get the future appreciation. And you don't get the mortgage pay down. So if you can do it, and we've discussed how reasonable it is to be able to do it, financially it just makes all the sense in the world. Become a real estate investor, buy the duplex, or move away from being a renter into becoming an owner, and it'll actually, in a lot of ways, pay you to do so. So that is going to wrap up everything for today's video. Hopefully, even if there's one person out there that decides to make the transition into buying a property, becoming an investor, that's great. If you have any questions about the video, maybe you want something elaborated on a bit more or something wasn't clear, go ahead and leave it in the comments section below. If you want to communicate with me directly, you can certainly do that. Pretty active on the socials, SJ Lincoln Realty. Most active is going to be Instagram. So if you do want to shoot me a DM, that's going to be probably the best route to do. Or if you prefer communicating via email, this goes directly to me. So it's steven@sjlincoln.com. Again, that email is sjlincoln.com. Questions ideally would be directed more of a public forum, so we can all benefit from that. So if you can leave it in the comments section below the video, I would encourage you, I would ask you to do that. But again, if you want more of a private response, certainly feel free to give me a shout. Hopefully you got something from this. Again, my name is Steve with SJ Lincoln Realty. The office is located here in Ballston Spa, New York. If you or somebody that you care about has a real estate related need in the capital region, always reach out to me. I'm happy to help out, whether it's buying, selling, renting, or obviously pretty active in those investment streets, if you will. give me a shout. So again, the way to get a hold of me, Stephen@sjlincoln.com, or you can visit sjlincoln.com/book a call. And there you can schedule a phone or Zoom conversation with me. Last time, Stephen@sjlincoln.com, STEVEN @sjlincoln.com, sjlincoln.com/book a call. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.